This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Blood Red podcast at the end of what's felt like a long international break. Liverpool are back in action this weekend in the FA Cup quarter-final away to Manchester City. I'm Mark Jones, coming to you from a kind of, let's say, remote location today, but Paul Gorst, ever the professional, has made his way into our Liverpool offices to talk about everything leading up to the FA Cup quarter-final. Before we start, though, just a word from one of our two sponsors today. I'd like to thank NordVPN, obviously one of our two sponsors today, and NordVPN and their app can help you with things like protection for your data whilst travelling and using public Wi-Fi. Nord also has a threat protection feature to protect you from viruses, malicious malware and phishing sites, and these features go across 10 devices with one account. For more benefits and more information, download NordVPN app to your device and click the link in the podcast episode description box below. Okay, so Liverpool off to Manchester City in the FA Cup quarter-final. Paul, you've been to see Arne this morning, previewing the game. He had a lot to say, didn't he? It was quite an eventful press conference. There's quite a lot to get through.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there was a lot of questions on Alexander Isak, who was back in training yesterday. He made a point, Arne Slot, a couple of times of saying how long he's been out for, which, you know, for fans of symmetry, you know, it's quite nice that it's 101 days. So he's back in training yesterday. And it was the old Jurgen Klopp rule, wasn't it, where if you came through 2 team training sessions, you were always deemed available for selection. Now, it'll be interesting to see if Arne Slot follows that same sort of technique, if you like, but he did hint that he might be back on the bench at the very least. He's certainly not going to be starting the game, but I just think it gives Liverpool a bit of a lift. You know, the £125 million striker who hasn't been seen since hobbling off at Tottenham back, you know, way before Christmas now, wasn't it? December the 20th, that game. So, yeah, seeing him back in training this week was good, and it was quite heartening to hear that Arne Slot feels that, you know, he's got a realistic chance of certainly being on the bench at Manchester City and then definitely being on the bench for Paris Saint-Germain next week. So, good news on that front. There was obviously talk about Mohamed Salah and his decision to leave at the end of the season. He almost reiterated what he'd said earlier this week to the official club channels about, you know, what an unbelievable career he's had at Liverpool. And, yeah, some positive updates, weren't there? You know, no Jeremie Frimpong injury. It looks like he's avoided something, which is good news. So, yeah, Liverpool in decent nick as they return to training and, you know, a couple of huge quarter-finals now, isn't it, against Manchester City and then Paris Saint-Germain. And, you know, considering it's been a really difficult season, you know, 10 defeats in the Premier League, you know, the fact that they've got these big things to, you know, still to chase, essentially the FA Cup and the Champions League, means that, you know, there's still a lot to be optimistic about for what is now, I think it's fair to say, the business end of the campaign. So, yeah, you know, it hasn't gone to plan by any stretch of the imagination, but Liverpool's still in there, still fighting on a big few days ahead.
Well, we'll stay with Isak because obviously that probably is the headline, isn't it, from the press conference? And it is, you know, it's not an insignificant thing, is it? He's been out for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's clear that he's been missed during that time. And you can, you know, obviously his form beforehand, his season hasn't gone the way that everyone had hoped it had, but there's no doubt that had he been around these last, 4 months, he would have made a big difference. You know, you've only got to look at Hugo Ekitike and the stresses and strains kind of on him, you know, and just having that alternate forward, it would have made a big difference. So it's a big thing to have him back, isn't it? He's the most expensive striker in English football. It's a big boost to have him back. Yeah,
undoubtedly. And, you know, it's twofold, really. You know, it's not just what you're missing with, you know, Alexander Isak and a player of his talent, because he, you know, he was the best number 9 in the Premier League last season, wasn't he? And I think it's 44 goals that he scored for Newcastle in the last 2 full Premier League seasons. So it's not just that calibre of player that you're missing, but also the knock-on effect for Ekitike when he's asked to play a bit more than perhaps his body is used to. And it's no surprise that we've seen him tire in games. You know, at the 60, 70-minute mark is significance, and his contribution starts to wane, you know, as the games go on. And just having Isak as someone to rotate with Ekitike in recent months would have made a huge difference for Liverpool, certainly in a couple of games at the very least. So yeah, it's great to have him back. I still suspect that, you know, we're not going to see the best Alexander Isak until next season. we'll have to see how it shakes up with the World Cup now. Obviously, Sweden have qualified, so he's going to be going there. He'll come back from there. Whenever they get knocked out, he'll have 3 weeks off. So that will impact his pre-season schedule. But if he can get something close to, as close to a full schedule as possible, then he will have a much better chance of doing what he couldn't do earlier this season, really, which was hit the ground running. So, yeah, we'll see the best of him next season, but still a big boost to have him back. And who knows, he might pop up with an important goal or two between now and the end of the season.
It feels a bit like we spent the start of the season kind of saying things like this. The international break was a chance to get him up to speed, and never quite happened. But actually, kind of feels like the World Cup could be good for him because Sweden qualifying. It's going to give him that boost, isn't it? Yes, they've done it while he's not there, and there's obviously Victor Gyökeres, who scored the goal. Who is perhaps taking that number 9 shirt off him, but maybe they can play together. It's something for him to look forward to at the end of what's, it's been a pretty difficult time, hasn't it? It's been all the stuff with the transfer, everything that went on, and then for this to happen to him, to have that World Cup to look forward to, and a goal almost to get fit for, that might be good for him. Yeah,
definitely. And he's going to want to get to, I was looking at their games yesterday. They play one in Mexico and they play the other 2 in Texas. So he'll want to get to the World Cup in as as fine fettle as possible. So that means that he will be doing the right things at Liverpool. Not that he wouldn't have been anyway, but it's just an extra incentive, isn't it, to make sure that you're at the best possible condition you could be in, given that the injury troubles that he's had, when it really matters at the business end of the season. So, I think you're right, really, in highlighting that as a potential positive for Liverpool. The knock-on effect, of course, is it will impact the summer schedule, but I think at the moment that that all of that can wait. Liverpool just need to get the top players fit, available, and ready, and ready to contribute. So, yeah, it's a big plus to have him back, and let's see how he is able to dovetail with the likes of Mo Salah and Florian Wirtz and Hugo Ekitike. And something that a slot echoed today actually was the fact that Ekitike, Wirtz and Isak have only played together for 88 minutes this season, which is, it's not even a full game, which is remarkable, really. So, yeah, it's really good news for Liverpool. And it's, the beginning of April. And then when May comes around, when they've got those really big games at Manchester United and at Aston Villa and Chelsea come to Anfield, it'll be a month further down the line. And then hopefully that is when we can start to see him scoring some of the important goals that can help Liverpool qualify for the Champions League.
You mentioned obviously the news on Frimpong. That's good news. Looks like it wasn't too bad of an issue with the Dutch team. Salah is coming back obviously after missing the Brighton game. The negative though, Alisson. We knew obviously out for a little spell, but Slot suggested towards the end of the season he used those words, which I think have taken a little, perhaps. People a little bit by surprise. It feels like it's perhaps a little bit more severe than perhaps we'd hoped. Obviously Alisson gets these injuries and he's always a big miss when he is out, but it's for it to come at such a crucial time. It's not ideal.
No, it's not, and it's one of the reasons why Liverpool were so determined to pay top whack really for the number 2 in Mohamed, with the view to him eventually succeeding Alisson as the first choice. And I think Liverpool have they know the importance of having a really good number 2, don't they? In recent years, you look at what Kelleher has been able to do, in the Carabao Cups, for example, and when he's had to step in the Premier League. When Alisson got injured before the Brighton game, I was looking it up, and he's missed 20 Premier League games across the last 2 full seasons. I think tomorrow might be Mohamed 7th. Well, saying that's not a Premier League game, is it? But with Alisson, but by the time he comes back, Mohamed might have racked up, 10, 11 Premier League appearances. Could even be more, couldn't it? I think he's on maybe 6 or 7 at the moment. So, yeah, I think it's just par for the course now with a player like Alisson Becker. It's rare to have goalkeepers who are injury prone, in inverted commas, but Alisson does seem to be that way inclined, and it's the trade-off, isn't it? You'd accept that he's one of the best goalkeepers in the world when he is fit, but also that he hasn't got a pristine injury record, which, sometimes you just have to deal with it. And that's why Mohamed was brought to the club. And, of course, Liverpool were eager to keep Alisson beyond the end of his contract, weren't they? So they extended it recently and he's got that year extension. But, it's it's not ideal, but like I say, Mamardashvili was brought to the club with a view to eventually succeed in Alisson Becker. So he's getting plenty of experience this season on what it's going to be like when he is number one week in, week out, because he's done it for a few weeks earlier in the season, wasn't he, when after Alisson got injured at Galatasaray. And, we're still not sure how long Alisson is going to be out for this time, but certainly with Slot saying towards the end of the season you'd expect it might be at least another month before we see Alisson return.
And we know when Mamardashvili came in, and I've seen him say things like this since. He has this confidence, doesn't he, that he is going to be the number one in future that perhaps we never really saw with Kelleher, because he knew, getting past Alisson and the age Alisson was at. But Alisson, yes, they've extended this contract by another year, but I think if you're Mamardashvili, you're going, well, this is my chance, and I'm sure he'll be thinking, there's nothing stopping him. Maybe this is a phasing out almost of Alisson, and he could take that reins perhaps for next season. I'm sure that's how he'll be thinking about this, to go into two massive games that he's got coming up. If he plays well, if he's not done much wrong so far. I see there might be one or two things here and there. I think he's not been helped out by his defenders sometimes, but he looks solid enough, and he'll surely be seeing this as a real opportunity to actually say to Alisson, no, I'm taking this, I'm taking the shirt, and then we'll start again next season. And, we know it's going to be Alisson's last season. Who is to say that Mamardashvili can't say, I'll be taking the shirt from you then, before that? Yeah,
sooner rather than later. Yeah, potentially. It's, Liverpool haven't just plucked a goalkeeper at random here, have they? He's a Georgian international. Okay, with respect to Georgia, maybe it's a little bit easier to get into that national team if you have a certain quality. But he is the number one for his country. He was playing at a really big club in Valencia, and Liverpool have paid really good money for what is, a goalkeeper in 29 million. So, ducks were being put in a row here, weren't they, long before anyone really knew that they needed to be put in place. I remember when Liverpool were looking to bring him in the summer of 2024 with a view to him actually arriving last summer. I was scratching my head thinking, what's the plan here? Because the last thing Liverpool looked like they needed at the time was a goalkeeper, given that they already had Kelleher and obviously Alisson. But it was with a view to eventually succeeding Alisson. I think there was an acceptance that these muscle injuries were starting to become a bit more frequent than they would have liked. And, I go back to 2019 when Alisson pulls up on the first day of the season against Norwich, and he misses 8 or 9 games there. Adrian steps in. That team before Kelleher has emerged as the deputy. So these injuries for Alisson have been going on for a number of years now, and Liverpool quite rightly have been determined to future-proof their goalkeeping department. So this is a real opportunity now for Mamardashvili with 2 huge games coming up, and then however long he's in the team for in the Premier League until Alisson comes back.
Yeah, so obviously I'm looking ahead to Manchester City. We're looking ahead to PSG as well. Just away from the press conference, I know you've caught up with Dominic Szoboszlai this week. I think it's safe to say, isn't it? I think it will have. I'm sure the words will be out perhaps when people are listening to this or watching this. Liverpool's player of the season, I think everyone would say. And how was he? On your Thursday night? Was he good company?
Yeah, it was good to catch up with him. I think we've seen this season that Szoboszlai has made a concerted effort to become a bit more of a visible presence around the mix zones, which for anyone who's not acquainted with them is basically the area where us reporters get to speak to the players after games, and normally it is Virgil van Dijk. But I think Szoboszlai growing in importance and stature, he has sort of come out a few times this season and spoken quite frankly and honestly, to be fair, and that speaks to, like I say, his growing importance within the squad. And yeah, we had a chance to speak to him yesterday as part of an event down at the Titanic Hotel for a charity called Football for Change. And yeah, it was good to catch up with him and just almost see how he feels things are going at Liverpool at the moment. It's obviously been a tough season for the club as a whole, but he has been a shining light. Arguably Liverpool's player of the season. I think maybe only Hugo Ekitike will rival him for that when they come to hand out the awards later this season. And yeah, he was very relaxed. He was fresh from training, arrived in the afternoon, and yeah, spoke about his love of the club, how much he's settled on Merseyside with his young family. Couple of interesting tidbits of when he signed for Liverpool, he actually missed a call from Jurgen Klopp because he was on the beach with his friends and his phone was ringing. He was out in the sea. So yeah, it was just good to hear one or two of those stories. And I think, I wouldn't necessarily say reading between the lines. There was an agreement that contract discussions were off the table as part of the conversation, but certainly he is hugely settled on Merseyside. He's happy at the club. He is in the form of his career this season, it's fair to say. And yeah, it just seems like he's going to grow in importance within this squad in the coming years. So in terms of those contract negotiations, they are ongoing, and it does sound as though they're perhaps heading in the right direction. And Liverpool could probably do with getting him tied down to follow on from Ryan Gravenberch a few weeks ago, because those two remain vitally important, at the ages they are, 25 and I think 23. So they're the long-term future of Liverpool's midfield. So let's get them both tied down to new deals and go from there.
You mentioned about the mix zones and him being a bit more forward, perhaps with the press. He's a national captain, isn't he? And we're perhaps seeing now, obviously, with the Mo Salah news, with Andy Robertson contracts coming towards an end. Whatever happens, we've spoken about Alisson. Whatever happens with him, he's got one more season after this. Only one more. Van Dijk only one more as it stands. We're seeing this. The ending of this great Liverpool side, aren't we? And these new leaders do have to step up and do have to step in. And people have spoken about Szoboszlai as a future captain, haven't they? And he's, whether or not that happens, you can tell he's a very important leader in the side, and the way he plays as well. It all lends itself to being a really important figure, doesn't it? In whatever Liverpool looks like from next season and beyond, he's going to be a crucial part of it.
Yeah. I think he got asked about being a future Liverpool captain after one of the Champions League games earlier this season, possibly Real Madrid. And I remember him saying at the time, well, we've got enough leaders here. We've got Mo, we've got Virgil, we've got Andy Robertson. And he was very keen to distance himself from that. But I think deep down he will have, long-term ambitions to take the armband at some point, because he, like I say, he is settled on Merseyside. He does want to stay by all accounts. And, why wouldn't you want to become the skipper? And yeah, he's saying all the right things. He's certainly doing all the right things on the pitch. And he has been, like I say, a real shining light this season at a time when, the collective drop has been concerning, hasn't it? He's the one who's not only kept to his level of last season, but gone up a level. So, yeah, that bodes well, because his best years of his career are arriving probably now, I'd say, at the age of 25. And, let's hope his best years are at Liverpool, because everything is pointing towards that as things stand. So, yeah, let's get him tied down and, like you say, potential future Liverpool captain.
We'll go a bit more in detail on the Man City game coming up in a second. Before we do, take a little moment to thank our second sponsor today, Saily. And what is Saily? Saily is an affordable, easy-to-use and sustainable eSIM service with reliable mobile internet connections from anywhere in the world, including Paris, which is very important, obviously, for next week. And with Saily, you can have a fast and reliable internet connection upon your arrival in your destination, and you can switch your virtual location back home so you can access content from back home. If you want to watch TV shows, or if you want to watch your favourite shows from back in the UK while you're away in Paris next week, Paul, like you will be, then you can get Saily and get sorted on that. So for more benefits and more information, download Saily in the App Store. And there's more on Saily in the podcast episode description box below. Anyway, we'll crack it on. Man City. It's whatever's gone on this season, and we know it's not been ideal. This is a week, isn't it? Whatever would have happened in the league, Liverpool would have wanted to arrive in this week in the FA Cup quarter-final and in the Champions League quarter-final. So, yeah, they've got to make the best of what is a huge week, haven't they? They've got to almost put aside everything. Maybe the international break will help with that. Perhaps a little bit of a clearing of the decks, bit of a fresh vibe to everything. Isak returning could be something as well that can help with that. Look, we know that City is going to be a daunting test. Won the Carabao Cup now as well. Can Liverpool go there? They're going to be underdogs, but can they go there with a bit of hope? Can they go there with a bit of something, with a bit of, to cause a cup, what would be a cup upset, if you like? Like, is there something that they can cling on to?
Yeah, Liverpool have generally tended to play better against the, in the bigger fixtures, shall we say, the bigger teams who want to sort of open up as much as Liverpool do and play football, essentially. You look at some of the big results this season, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, and even to an extent, obviously they took 4 points off Arsenal as well, but, even, that second half at Anfield where Liverpool were probably really unfortunate to lose the game, weren't they? It was a bit of a crazy end to that one, and they were well beaten at the Etihad in November. I think, Arne always sort of makes the caveat of that disallowed goal just before half-time from Virgil van Dijk, but for me, they were second best and didn't deserve anything from that game, and, you have to sort of take your medicine at times like that, but yeah, tomorrow will be a different game. You wonder how much of a psychological boost City have from winning that Carabao Cup. Can they almost take their eye off the FA Cup, thinking that they might be able to reel Arsenal in on the back of that victory? I'm not sure, but this still remains City's most realistic chance of additional silverware, doesn't it? With speculation around Pep Guardiola's future and whether this is actually his last season at the Etihad. So he will be determined to go out on an absolute high if that is to be the case. I don't think anything's been decided either way by all accounts, but yeah, it's going to be tough. The 12:45 tomorrow, isn't it? The kickoff schedule doesn't really lend itself to Liverpool in terms of having to make the trip to Manchester. Of course, it's a much shorter trip than it was to Brighton a fortnight ago, but City are in the same boat in terms of having so many internationals, from here, there and everywhere across Europe and across the world. So it's a level playing field in that regards, and it's going to be tough, of course it is, but I wouldn't necessarily be going there thinking Liverpool have no hope. It's a huge couple of games. It's a potentially not season defining if they win, but if Liverpool have a couple of bad results over the next few days, it's looking like all you're left with is just the battle for the Champions League, isn't it? To qualify for the Champions League, where Liverpool have really struggled, actually, haven't they, in the Premier League with 10 defeats from the 31 games. So this is an opportunity for the players as much as anyone else to continue the push for silverware and just to continue the, if there is anything of it, a bit of a feel-good factor rolling into next week. So tough game, but, you're not going to win the FA Cup without coming up against someone at some stage. So yeah, let's see. I agree with you. I don't make Liverpool favourites, but who knows? Maybe City have got one eye on the Premier League title race again, and let's see what happens.
One thing we should mention, actually, Pep Guardiola is not going to be in the dugout. He's banned, and that means that the very familiar figure of Pep Lijnders will be there. I think he ruffled a few feathers, didn't he, when he went to City after such a long time, with Jurgen Klopp being so successful. I think he said Klopp himself told him you'd be stupid not to take the job, to work with Guardiola. Do you think that will have an impact on the game? I mean, Lijnders knows obviously a lot of the Liverpool players very well. Was obviously famed, wasn't he, for the kind of pressing, putting the pressing sort of game into Liverpool, something which you say they haven't had a lot of this season. So is that going to make an effect, or is that just, would it perhaps be psychological, perhaps on the City player side, to look at on the touchline and Guardiola's not there?
Yeah, maybe. I was on LFC TV before, and it was Sammy Lee who mentioned that Guardiola had a touchline ban. I think I'd had completely forgotten about that, to be honest, before the international break. But yeah, it'd be strange, honestly, seeing Pep Lijnders in the other technical area, having worked with Liverpool for so long. What was it? 9 years, wasn't it? When he came in initially as under-16s coach, I think, and then worked his way up and then became such an influential figure around the club to the point where he's even released a book, didn't he? And yeah, he is, a sort of familiar face of such an important period in the club's history, under Jurgen Klopp, and he will know a lot about the players who are going to be on the opposition against City on Saturday. So yeah, I think that will have a little bit of a part to play, if I'm being honest. I don't blame Pep Lijnders for making that move. I know some supporters feel that it was a bit of a betrayal, but ultimately the opportunity to be one of the few people to work with both Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola at such close quarters, two of the greatest coaches of the modern era, there's no way he could have turned that down, particularly given that, it would have been relatively close as well to where he lived. Manchester and Liverpool are stone's throw away from each other relatively. So I don't see why anyone should harbour any grudges towards Pep Lijnders over that one. But having said that, all these sort of niceties of, him being a staple of the Klopp era, that goes out the window, doesn't it, on Saturday lunchtime, and he will be the one in the other dugout trying to get one over on Liverpool. So, Liverpool have got to forget about him as a sort of familiar, friendly face.
Yeah, we'll get to our teams then, and we know who's going to start in goal, so we can obviously, because I don't think Freddie Woodman's going to get thrown in at the Etihad just yet. So we know it'll be Mohamed in goal. How about your back four?
Yeah, I mean, I know Slot doesn't like to use all three of his centre-backs in the same team, just in case one of them comes a cropper and you've got no spare centre-back. So I'm not sure he'll do this, but I'd like to see Joe Gomez play. He's going to be up against Jeremy Doku on that side, isn't he? And I think just, a bit more of a defence-first right-back is what Liverpool need for this one, rather than maybe having Szoboszlai in there or Jeremie Frimpong. So I'm going to go Joe Gomez. Milos Kerkez comes back in at left back, and obviously Canate and Van Dijk.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. I think we know the threat of Doku, don't we? And he was brilliant, wasn't he, in the league game earlier in the season when he scored. I think Gomez, ultimately, yeah, you're going to need those sorts of players, aren't you, for games like this? He's been dropped in and out, we know, but with the news around Frimpong, he seemed to suggest in today's slot that I feel like Frimpong's okay, but not perhaps, certainly needs to manage his minutes, I think, is the way he talks about it, isn't it? And for a game that could go to extra time, potentially, you could have that element to it. You think Frimpong could be useful in an extra time period, couldn't he? So, yeah, I'll stick with that. I agree with you on that one. Into midfield, I'll go first. I'll go with Gravenberch, and I'll go with Curtis Jones, because McAllister's been away, hasn't he, with Argentina? Yeah. And hasn't been in the best of form generally, has he? Curtis Jones, I think, deserves more starts. So I'll have those two, and then I'll go with that for now, and then we'll have Szoboszlai, obviously, but we'll talk about his position in a second. But yeah, that's my midfield. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I always, the thing that always sticks out for me is McAllister, his performance against Wolves, and I know it's going back a lot now, a long time.
Oh yeah.
But,
he's shocking, wasn't he?
When he comes back from international duty and Liverpool play in the early game, having travelled so much, he's generally not at his fittest and his sharpest, and he hasn't had a great season by all accounts anyway, has he? So I'd be minded to leave him out for this one. Curtis comes in, Gravenberch keeps his place, and then Szoboszlai has to start, so he goes into the sort of central role, and then it's just a case of what you do as your front three, I guess.
Yeah, so the reason I sort of wavered over Szoboszlai is I think I'd be looking at doing that box thing that he did there last season. When they won the league game so well, and you can have Szoboszlai and Wirtz as the kind of two, almost like the 4-2-2-2, isn't it? And then Szoboszlai and Wirtz as your middle two. And then I know he's back fit now and Slot's there, but I think I'd be minded to maybe have Salah on the bench as perhaps a bit of an impact sub. And so you start with Ekitike and Gakpo, and then you have Salah in reserve ready to come on, and you have McAllister and you have Robertson, good players who can come into a potential kind of extra time situation. Do you agree with that, or are you putting Salah straight back into the side?
Yeah, no, I totally get your points. Liverpool, when they went to the Etihad last season with that sort of almost just no recognised number 9, wasn't it? And it worked a treat. Szoboszlai scores. They have a third goal narrowly ruled out for offside when Jones and Szoboszlai combined, and they were the two sort of runners, weren't they, from midfield? So, yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. For me, just to play devil's advocate, I'll keep Salah in the team. Hugo Ekitike can lead the line. And then I'll pick Florian Wirtz out on the left with Cody Gakpo and or Rio and Gamoa to come on at some stage and add to that front line. And also Jeremie Frimpong as well. Like you say, if it does go to extra time, there is opportunity for him to stretch, the tired back lines with his pace and his ability to stay out wide and stretch teams. So, yeah, I'll go with those three with quite a lot in reserve, actually, for Liverpool, which is unusual. And Alex Isak on the bench as well. Maybe he can get 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, the strength of the bench, I think, is something that I've always noticed this season with it being injuries and people not being around. But to have a really strong bench like that is crucial, isn't it? Anyway, on to predictions then. What are you thinking?
Yeah, well, like I say, I was on LFC TV this morning and they asked me for a prediction. So I'll stay consistent. I'll say Liverpool are going to win on penalties.
after a 1-1 draw, something like that?
Oh, yeah. 1-1. 1-1, why not? I think it's going to be tough. I mean, Liverpool are going to have to dig in, going to have to fight. They're going to have to accept that maybe for large spells of the game, they're going to be second best. And then what can you do when they get the ball? What can you do in possession? Can they hurt City on counter-attacks? Can they utilise the spaces? But it's going to be tough. But yeah, I'll go with a 1-1 draw and then Liverpool to nick it on pens.
I like the sound of that, yeah. I mean, penalties is... would you take penalties now? I think I possibly would. So yeah. No, you know what? I'm gonna go with the exact same prediction, so we can will it into being. Maybe if we both say it, then it might happen. So yeah, 1-1 and Liverpool to win on penalties. But thanks very much to Paul for joining us today. Thanks so much for watching and listening as well. And we'll be back next week to react to the Man City game and preview PSG in the Champions League. So big week ahead, and we'll see you then.
You've been listening to the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.